Your brief actually covers quite a bit of the things that are going on at some of the migrant hotels, like adult social care, etc. Just talk us through what you made of that initial clip there and the current situation in your area.
Good evening, Patrick, and good evening to your viewers. Yeah, this is a really serious situation. We've got a national and international crisis. As we've talked about before, this is pretty much now a catastrophic and disastrous situation given what we see happening at the border. And one of the things that is creating a real problem at the local level is not just the issue of hotels and some of the issues you were just raising in your clip there, but also the downstream pressures on local services, including school places, school transport, GP surgeries, hospital appointments, housing, so on and so forth. And that is becoming a real problem to us at the local government level. Yes, we get a certain amount of funding, and that is provided directly to local councils, but it doesn't account for that downstream cost for those wider services that we have to provide. And then on top of that, there are issues relating to unaccompanied asylum seekers, so that's individuals under the age of 18. And when you're looking at those kinds of individuals, they have complex needs and there are safeguarding imperatives. So that's another resource burden, another pressure on the system, and that is a real problem.
It is indeed. Just in terms of the costs for people and the local council, because people might not understand this, they think maybe the Home Office is paying entirely for that hotel, for example, but you've got issues when it comes to things like your social housing, potentially the lower end of the private rental sector being commandeered as well by the Home Office. You mentioned things like school places, presumably doctor's appointments, mental health services, etc. Can you just talk to me a little bit about some of the costs there? Because it's worth bearing in mind as well that you don't really get a say in any of this, do you?
We don't. We have had to take asylum seekers without consultation, without collaboration or coordination. That's something the Home Office desperately need to change. Local authorities need to be involved in those decisions. And you're right, we then have to effectively deal with the challenges and the downstream pressures that come with that. And let me just give you some numbers, Patrick. So in terms of school admissions, we currently have 223 nationals, refugees and refugees seeking asylum attending RBWM schools. As a result of that, we're experiencing a shortage in Year 5 places, in particular across the borough. For school transport, we've had to increase vehicle capacity to transport refugees and refugees claiming asylum, which is perfectly legitimate. But this equates to 15 new children or young people at an additional cost of around about £59,000. Health visiting school nursing, we've had around about 45 drop-in surgeries to the 2 hotels in Maidenhead and Datchet since April, each comprising between 1 to 3 health staff. Social care, we've had to do assessments of families. That's been around about 86 Ukrainian children and young people, 63 assessments of children and young people from other nationalities across the hotels. And we've taken around about 25 young people from the National Transfer Scheme and 6 from the hotels. That's 31 in total. And they have, as you say, often very complex needs. They need not just NHS intervention, but also mental health support and safeguarding. All of this adds up as a cost. And one thing I would want to remind government of, and I think this is an imperative, local governments have to provide balanced budgets. We can't just whack things on the credit card. We have to legally each year deliver a balanced budget. And so government has to really get a grip of this situation and understand that if you're asking local councils to take on the burden, you've got to provide more resource and more funding. It's simply not fair.
Well, and this is part of it. I was going to ask you 2 questions in one here, really, Stuart, if that's all right, which is, are you receiving a lot of emails or letters or face-to-face consultations with residents who have been living in your area for a long time, who maybe are now struggling to access services, maybe, housing stock, etc.? But also, where are you finding that money from? Because if you've got to legally deliver a balanced budget, you've got to be finding that money from somewhere.
Absolutely. In terms of your first question, yes. A lot of emails, a lot of questions. Also, the leader of the council, Councillor Andrew Johnson, who's been on your show before, he's been receiving a lot of follow-up communication on this. People are naturally concerned. People are compassionate and people want to play their role. But of course, when you're dealing with the size of the problem that we're having to tackle, it understandably causes that concern and that anxiety. And in terms of what we're having to do, it's very difficult. We're having to look across all of our services, the entire local government framework, and we're beginning to have to make really tough choices, tough decisions. And that shouldn't be happening. Yes, local government should be held accountable for the decisions it needs to take, but it can't be held accountable or responsible for these external pressures which national government really needs to deal with.